This tutorial is about one of my favorite things to do in Unity, which is to instantiate objects into the game with code. So to get started, all I've got is a basic scene here with an empty game object that I've named Magic Spawn Point. This is where objects are going to be created from. I've also got down here in my assets folder a bunch of different models that I've downloaded from the asset store. You can see that I've downloaded a bunch of city objects here, and I got this from the stylized, simple cartoon city, but it really doesn't matter. You can do this with cubes or whatever. I'm just making it a little more interesting by instantiating these prefabs instead. So let's take a look at how this works. If I'm going to click on my magic spawn point, this is what the script is going to be attached to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll create a new script by choosing add component, new script, and I'll say spawn stuff. That'll be the name of my script. Create an ad and pop that open. Nice. Now instantiate works like this. We can say instantiate, call that function, and it takes 3 arguments, right? 3 parameters need to get passed to it. The first is the object that we're instantiating. Well, we can't just write in code, make the red car or something like that, right? We can't just tell it. It needs to be explicitly told which game object we're talking about here. So I prefer to do it this way. There's a lot of different ways that you could put a specific object in there, but I'm going to do a public var that it's going to be called, let's call it item to keep it generic, and it's going to be of type game object. Now I'm not going to fill it with anything, right? It doesn't equal anything, it's just going to end there, and we're going to fill it in Unity. Now here I can simply say item, and whatever is inside here is going to be what gets spawned. Now the second argument for the instantiate function is going to be the position. So transform.position is going to make it get created exactly where the spawn point is. So if that makes sense, that's basically going to be saying that wherever, whatever game object this script spawn stuff is attached to, it's going to inherit that position when it is entered into the world. Now the last argument is for rotation. The default rotation is actually in quaternions, which is not. It's called quaternion identity. It's not a very well-known way of measuring, but it has to do with needing 4 values for measuring rotation in order to avoid something that we call gimbal lock in 3D, where axes tend to overlap each other if they're turned in certain configurations. If it's easier for students who are just learning, we can also use transform.rotation here. It's not exactly the same, but what it'll do is, again, it'll inherit the rotation of the object that spawn stuff is attached to. So in this case, this will all pretty much zero out, right? Because it doesn't have any position, it's 0, 0, 0, and it doesn't have any rotation, 0, 0, 0. So these objects are just going to start appearing. Now I've put mine in the start function right now, so when I save my game and jump back into Unity, I can click on the magic spawn point here. I can see that a new variable is about to pop up. Yep, there it is, item of type game object. And I'm going to choose something from the list of different assets here. Wow, why is there a bomb in here? That's interesting. I'm going to click on magic spawn point and let's put a car. Let's drag a car in for item. And I click play. And sure enough, there it is. Cool, a car appears right on that spot, just like we thought it would. The magic spawn point has a rotation and position of 0, 0, 0, and so does the car. It's worth noting that the car comes in with the name, with clone after it. I'm going to show you how to deal with that just after we start instantiating a few more of these. Now when I hit the exit play mode, I'll come back over here and I'm going to move this from the start function into the update function, which is a little bit more fun because with the update function runs every frame. So now what I should see is when I hit play, my hierarchy starts filling up with these cars, and I can move my spawn point here to be able to see them all, and maybe just even do a freeform sort of draw. This is pretty cool. I think the kids are going to like this a lot. It is devastating to your processing power over time, so if you make too many of these, you're going to crash. With that said, it's probably a good time to save, so maybe we do a quick Command S, and you can just call this scene 1 or whatever, because we are going to be creating a whole ton of these. Now let's make this a little more interesting. If I come back in and I'm going to take that same car again from my models folder, I'll bring it into the scene, but this time I'm going to do a couple things to it. I'm going to go through and add component, physics, rigid body, so that now when I hit my play button, that car will fall. Let's see if this happens. It's going to load. Okay, there it goes. That one car is falling. I'm also going to go ahead and add a collider to it so that it'll bump into other things that have colliders. So physics, box collider, and How's that look? I don't actually see the collider. Let's check the size real quick. Yeah, it's a little bit small. This kind of gets into another thing about making the proper colliders for game objects, but for now I'm going to kind of whiz through this and we'll do a different one, a different tutorial on box colliders at some point. There we go, though. That looks great. All I've done here is I've adjusted the size values here, the X, Y, and Z size of the box collider. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually come back to my assets folder and take this car as it is now with the collider and the rigid body and drag it down into my project window. Now that it's in my project window, it is a prefab object, prefabricated game object. I can delete the original, and in the magic spawn point, I'm going to drag the car, the new car in instead. Now when I hit play, I should see something a lot more energetic because the collisions are happening every frame. These are basically appearing inside of each other, and I'm getting this awesome simulation here. Very cool. And I should be able to even change this. If I had a few different cars, I could even change this in real time and have it shooting different things. Obviously, this can be turned into a million different things, whether it's more of a particle effect or whether it's some sort of shooting projectile dodgeball game or something like that. I've used this for Instantiate, gets used all the time. I'm going to talk about one more thing really quick before I move on here, and that's going to be what I mentioned before about all those cars being called a clone. Now, if I come back here, I actually can't really do much with this item once it's thrown into the world. If I wanted to, say, rotate it after the fact or rename it or parent it or do any of these other interesting things that I can do, I'm actually going to need to store it first in a variable. So I like to call this var instance. And then on the next line down, I can do some interesting things like let's rename it, for instance. So I'm going to say, no pun intended, instance.transform.name equals another car. Hit a semicolon on there and see what happens with this one. I'll hit play, it spawns, and look at this. Another car, another car, another car, another car for all of them, right? So you could do some interesting things there. You can also add tags to each of these objects, right here where it's untagged. That's something, I mean, you can do so much. You can add torque to them, you can add force, and of course we can use things like if statements and for loops to make this happen a certain number of times or in a more controlled way than the simulation. But this is awesome. This is pretty hilarious. So I'm happy with this Instantiate demo. Other than that, we're going to move on to bigger and better things. There's tons to do with Instantiate. Try it out with your kids. These guys, they're going to love this one.